Hello and welcome to CivilNet. Joining me today from Maryland is award-winning Armenian Jordanian filmmaker Sareen Hairabedian. Her latest documentary, My Sweet Land, is among the 169 documentary films from 85 countries around the world that are eligible for the 2025 Academy Awards. My Sweet Land captures the life in Artsakh through the eyes of Vrej, a young boy who is navigating the shadows of war. Thank you, Sareen, for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So, after winning 3 major awards at the Amman International Film Festival, My Sweet Land was selected as Jordan's official submission for the Best International Film category at the Oscars, but it was later withdrawn under diplomatic pressure from Azerbaijan. Could you walk us through the process of what happened and how you managed to keep the film's journey moving forward?
Of course. In July, we went to Amman International Film Festival, and the film is a Jordanian co-production because of my Jordanian citizenship and my producers, Azerbaijanis. And there it was received with a lot of love and positivity, and we got the 3 awards that you had mentioned: the Audience Award, the Jury Award, and the Fipresky Award. And after that, the film became the official submission of Jordan to the Academy Awards. However, around a month later, we heard the news from the Academy that the submission was withdrawn. We went back to the Royal Film Commission, who have been major supporters of our film from the days of its development, and we wanted some answers. And the reason that was given to us was that Azerbaijan had pressured Jordan for them to maintain diplomatic relations, that they withdraw.
Well, following Jordan's withdrawal, though, the Academy ruled that your film was eligible for Best Documentary Feature for that category. What are the steps that you're now taking? Because I know that it's not just a very straightforward, okay, so you're eligible, but there are other steps involved before you actually get nominated for the Oscars race, right?
Yeah, well, once we heard about the withdrawal, we knew that this is not a dead end for us, because we, as a team, decided that this will not stop us from telling Vrej's story and Artsakh's story on the global stage. So we switched gears and really worked in order to get this qualified for the documentary category. And to do that, there's certain steps you have to take, like doing a theatrical run for 7 days in a cinema. And that's what we're doing in 2 days on November 29th at Laemmle in Glendale in Los Angeles, where the film will play for 7 days and just be shared with the audiences in LA and specifically in Glendale. So the idea is for us now to just continue to push the story forward and to get more eyes on it. And that's part of our impact campaign. That's part of our, hopefully, the next step for it to get shortlisted in the Academy for the documentary category. And from there, then you will campaign again in order to get the film nominated. So it's a long journey, but I think throughout this journey, our main goal is to just continue telling the story as wide as possible.
And just to clarify, so basically the next 7 days that you're saying that it's going to be screening in theaters, that's open to the public as well, right?
Of course, yes. And we welcome everybody, whoever is in the area in LA, to come and watch. It will be playing 4 times a day for 7 consecutive days, starting 29th of November until December 5th.
Great. So going back to kind of the pressure that Azerbaijan Azerbaijan uses pretty much every tool at its disposal to ensure that stories about Artsakh just don't make it to the global stage. As someone who's been personally involved with this, what advice would you give to future creatives that are working on similar topics?
I think what I would tell any filmmaker or person who's making any kind of work that is related to Artsakh is that this is the time where we need to continue telling the stories of this region, despite the silencing that we might face, despite any kind of censorship. And that's because we are as storytellers, we are the keepers of history at this point. And I think moving forward, there needs to be even more work that's coming out of this region, telling the stories of not only from political angles, but also from very human perspectives. Vrej's story is a story of a child growing up in a war zone, and he is one of the first victims of wars are children. So to see how these stories are politicized in order for certain countries to gain political, to see these stories being politicized for specific gains between countries and their relationships is extremely unfortunate. And I think that is the only way forward is to just continue telling these stories and continue telling the human stories that belong to this region.
Yeah. And so you also have a very unique heritage. You are of Armenian, Palestinian, if I'm not mistaken, and Jordanian heritage. Your background reflects a history of genocide, displacement, and resilience. How does this personal connection really influence how you tell your stories through film?
Yeah, I think in documentary filmmaking and specifically the style that I have chosen to make films in, which is very observational, it's important that I immerse myself in the spaces where I want to tell the stories of the people. And in order to do that in the most raw and authentic way, I feel like I need to be very much connected with that story that's coming out of the camera, that's coming out of this creation process. And my background as an Armenian, Palestinian, with families displaced from one place to another since the Armenian genocide, I feel that kind of encompasses the reasons to why I put myself in spaces where I feel that the stories that I see are a reflection of my history. And I think in order for us as a people, as a society, as Armenians, as Palestinians, to heal and to move forward is also for us to come in terms with our stories and to really build and construct forward. And in order to be able to do that, we need to know how to tell our stories of the past and to build off of that for a more brighter steps forward.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about your process of immersion, you spent over 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, earning the trust of Vrej and his family and capturing these really intimate moments. How did you approach building that relationship, and what are some of the challenges that you might have faced along the way?
Yeah, I filmed with him. I met Vrej in 2018, and since then I've been filming with him all the way to 2022, which was right before the blockade that happened. And that was mainly a work that included a lot of relationship building and a lot of trust. From the first time I met him and his family, it wasn't that I started filming. We had to spend a lot of time together. We had to eat dinners together. I lived with them in their space, their village. I knew the school. I knew the neighbors. So it was a very holistic experience of getting to know what it is to be in Artsakh and to be in Zargashen, their village. And by building that trust, means that I am also very vulnerable to them as much as they are to me. And I think that really created this bond between us, where I even call this more like a collaboration of making a film, because it goes both ways, especially when you're working in spaces and times where it's vulnerable. Filming during war times where nobody really wants a camera to be put in front of them. But I think achieving this long-term trust and presence, my presence in their space, allowed me to be able to turn the camera on in times where you wouldn't want to typically do that. And I think that also answers a little bit of the question of the challenges. It's also knowing when to stop because of the situations that we're in, and because of the really emotional trauma and the emotional difficulties and physical difficulties that they were going through. So that's always something that I was thinking about, to film, and when to stop, when to interfere and when to not interfere. So these were both, I think, challenges, but also things that I learned about just making films in areas of war and conflict.
So you were saying how you were portraying the life of Vrej, who was a very young child, and kind of explaining how children are the most vulnerable when it comes to times of war. Not to spoil anything, but basically you could tell that Vrej is very conflict averse throughout the whole documentary. Despite his aversion to conflict, you can tell that he kind of accepted it as an inevitable part of his life. This normalization of conflict, would you say that it's similar to how children grow up in other war-torn countries as well, or regions?
I think children that are growing up in conflict zones, like Vrej, or like any other child growing up in regions like Palestine, like Lebanon, I think children, first of all, grow up older than their years, wiser than their years, because they are surrounded in conversations and in situations that are much larger than them and that is out of their control. But I think with that also, they build a sort of resilience that is not seen in children that are not being brought up in such spaces. And it's unfortunate, though, because there's also a level of innocence that is being ripped away and that is being missed for these children to experience a life that is free of potential danger. So I think from what I learned from Vrej and his family in Artsakh, is that the level of resilience is on such another level. Like, you see it in the film. They're sitting and they're studying and they're just trying to do their daily homework, and then a mine explodes in the distance. They look at it and then they turn back and they continue studying. And that on its own is, I think, resilience explained in just as simple as it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to thank you again for joining us today and having this conversation with us. And I wish you all the best of luck in the next steps in your journey towards the Academy Awards. And thank you for joining CivilNet.